How does ambiguity exaggerate bias?
Yeah, this is a really important part of the argument that that often gets overlooked, because I think most scholars sort of accept that motivated reasoning happens, that people are biased and they approach certain kinds of information, and they are really resistant to information that challenges their beliefs. But there's another perspective that some scholars continue to believe, is that people are generally motivated to seek accuracy. And the way they can reconcile this with all of the findings demonstrating the selective exposure effect and this political bias effect is that let's say I think a really hyperbolic example would be, I believe the Earth is a sphere. I'm pretty sure it's a sphere. And so when I see an article that says the Earth is flat, why would I read it? It's a waste of my time. So you could apply that same logic to any sort of political argument. I'm sure I'm right. So it would be a waste of my time to read an argument that challenges it, because that's obviously a stupid argument because I'm right. And this is a really complicated issue. The cases where you see it, the reason it's so complicated is because when information is plainly obvious, when the truth is known and there's no refuting it, like tree's leaves are green or something, even if people really wanted to believe that they weren't, they couldn't, because it would blow their credibility. People would think that they were crazy. And so biases reveal themselves only when there's plausible deniability surrounding the issue. So they not only, I shouldn't say only, but mainly reveal themselves in cases where the information is ambiguous. And this would, I think, apply to all kinds of empirically incorrect beliefs. So things like superstitions or supernatural beliefs. One reason people can have those beliefs is because it's impossible to prove that they're definitely stupid, right? Like no one can prove that ghosts don't exist, or nobody can prove that, I don't know, what would be a more ridiculous one? That Nessie doesn't exist. Now that's a more extreme example, but in the context of politics, almost everything is ambiguous. Like if you take any particular political issue where there's disagreement, it's on a really complicated issue that involves like policies that could have a positive effect and a negative effect, and we don't know how big or when they would happen or what all the consequences would be. And so it's easy to maintain. I mean, even take something like climate change, where, people generally agree that it's happening. And so it looks like, it's not an ambiguous issue. We know it's happening. Well, people disagree about how big of a catastrophe it is. People disagree about what we should do in response to it. And so even though bits of it are sort of clear, a lot of it is really unclear. And so having various beliefs about climate change are sort of defensible. And so you really get the politicization of issues and polarization surrounding issues when they're really complicated, when they're really ambiguous, when you don't have other good information that can prove you're definitely wrong. And what's fascinating about this to me is that what that means is that all of our biggest political disputes that we have, all the things that we hate each other for, are for things where we really don't yet know what the best thing is. And so it's precisely for the things where we should have more humility, where we should be more uncertain, and we should be more likely to be like, oh, it's possible, we have different perspectives because it's complicated and we're difficult trade-offs. But instead, what happens is both sides become entrenched, both sides become more sure of themselves, and both sides hate the other side for having these different beliefs. And so it's just, it's basically what you need. It's the piece that you need to really see polarization, is this ambiguity or this complicated information environment where it's really hard to know what's true, that allows people to be biased, that allows them to basically use their group as the main input in forming their belief because they don't know. But consequently, that makes them certain that they know, and in two completely opposite ways or more, depending on how many groups we're talking about.